The boss froze when he saw his missing daughter's pendant on the waitress's neck. The wine glass slipped from Thomas Harrington's fingers like it was never meant to be held at all. The sound of crystal shattering against Italian marble cut through the elegant murmur of Villa Dorata, like a gunshot. 50 of Chicago's wealthiest residents turned in their seats, forks frozen midair, conversations dying on their lips. But Thomas couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't tear his eyes away from the young waitress approaching his table with a napkin in her hand. It wasn't her face. It wasn't her voice. It was the pendant, a small silver dolphin with an emerald embedded in its eye, dangling delicately against the tan skin of her neck. The same one he'd had custom-made in Santa Fe 20 years ago. The same one he'd given his daughter Emily on her 7th birthday, just 3 weeks before she vanished forever. "Are you all right, sir?" the waitress asked, her voice soft as she knelt to collect the shards of glass. Thomas's throat closed up, his gray eyes filled with tears he hadn't allowed himself to shed in years. The memories hit him like a freight train. Emily running through the garden at their farmhouse downstate, her crystalline laughter, her braids flying in the wind, her honey-colored eyes sparkling in the sunlight. And then, darkness, the kidnapping, the phone call, the eternal silence. That pendant, Thomas finally managed, his voice cracking. "Where did you get it?" The young woman stood, startled. Her hand flew instinctively to the silver dolphin. "I'm sorry, sir. I've always had it. It's the only thing I have from my life before." "Before?" Thomas stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "What do you mean, before?" The waitress, Lucy, according to her name tag, took a step back, fear flickering across her face. She looked about 27, with dark hair pulled into a high ponytail, and those same honey-colored eyes that now stared at him with confusion and alarm. I don't remember anything before I was 7. Sir, they found me at an orphanage in Arizona. This pendant was with me. They told me it was the only thing I was wearing. The restaurant had gone completely silent. Thomas felt the floor shift beneath his feet. 20 years. 20 years of searching, of hiring private investigators, of offering $1 million rewards, of begging God for a sign. And now, on some random December night, fate had placed him face to face with a ghost from his past. But there was a problem. The girl who disappeared was named Emily Harrington. This young woman was Lucy Miller, and according to every investigator he'd ever hired, his daughter had been dead for a long time. Thomas Harrington had built a pharmaceutical empire from nothing. Harrington Biopharma was the 3rd largest company of its kind in the country. He had mansions, yachts, offshore accounts, but none of it had filled the void Emily left behind. His wife, Caroline, had died of grief 5 years after the kidnapping. Consumed by depression and medication, Thomas had been left alone, surrounded by gold and silence. He remembered that night like it was yesterday. They'd been at the farmhouse in downstate Illinois, the one Caroline loved because of the marigold garden she'd planted herself. Emily had been playing by the stone fountain, singing one of those off-key lullabies Caroline taught her. Thomas had gone inside to take a business call, just 5 minutes, maybe 10. When he came back out, she was gone. The police found tire tracks. A witness reported seeing a black sedan speeding away. There was a ransom call, just one, demanding $2 million and threatening Emily's life if they contacted the authorities. Thomas had paid immediately, no questions asked, but Emily never came home. The money disappeared into a ghost account. The trail went cold. Caroline never recovered. She'd wake up screaming every night, convinced she heard Emily calling for her. The medication started as a way to sleep, then became a way to exist, and finally, a way to escape. When she overdosed 5 years later, Thomas couldn't even bring himself to be surprised. Part of him had died with her. Now he lived in a massive estate in Naperville, attended by staff who feared him but didn't know him. His only company was his younger sister, Patricia Harrington, who managed part of the business and lived in the east wing of the property. Patricia had always been cold, calculating, jealous of her brother's success. But Thomas had never imagined how deep that resentment ran. "Sir, I really need to get back to work," Lucy said quietly, breaking through his spiraling thoughts. Thomas blinked, realizing he'd been staring at her for what must have been a full minute. Around them, conversations had cautiously resumed, though he could feel dozens of eyes still watching. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice hoarse. "I didn't mean to frighten you, it's just that pendant. My daughter had one exactly like it." Lucy's expression softened slightly. She was taken from me 20 years ago. She was 7 years old. Something flickered in Lucy's eyes. Recognition? Maybe. Or just sympathy. She glanced around the restaurant, then back at him. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said. "But this pendant, I've had it my whole life. At least as long as I can remember." "You said you don't remember anything before you were 7. "That's right. The orphanage couldn't find any records of where I came from. No missing persons reports matched my description. It was like I just appeared." Thomas's heart hammered in his chest. "What's your full name?" "Lucy Miller." "And you're how old?" 27? The math lined up perfectly. Emily would be 27 now, but that didn't mean anything. Lots of girls were 27. Lots of people had memory gaps. This was probably just some cosmic coincidence designed to torture him. Except Thomas Harrington had stopped believing in coincidences the day his daughter disappeared. "Lucy," he said carefully, "I know this is going to sound crazy, but would you be willing to take a DNA test? I'll pay for everything. Of course, I need to know." Lucy's eyes widened. "You think I'm your daughter. I don't know what to think, but that pendant is one of a kind. I had it made by a jeweler in Santa Fe. The emerald came from my wife's engagement ring. There's not another one like it in the world." Lucy reached up and touched the dolphin, her fingers trembling slightly. For 20 years. It had been her only connection to a past she couldn't remember. She'd worn it every single day, through foster homes and group shelters, through high school and community college, through every waitressing job and tiny apartment. It had been her anchor, her proof that she'd come from somewhere, that someone had loved her once. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll do the test." Thomas left Villa Dorada that night with Lucy's phone number and a vial of her saliva, headed to the most reputable DNA lab in Chicago. He sat in his armored SUV for 20 minutes, hands shaking too badly to start the engine. What if it was her? What if, after all this time, Emily had been alive, living just miles away, serving tables to people who didn't know her story? What if he'd walked past her a dozen times without recognizing her? And what if it wasn't her? What if this was just another dead end? Another false hope designed to break what little remained of his heart? His phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. "Where are you?" "Cook made dinner." Thomas stared at the message, then deleted it without responding. He couldn't face his sister right now. Couldn't face the mansion, or the empty rooms, or the portrait of Emily that hung in the east hallway, frozen forever at 7 years old. Instead, he drove to the farmhouse. It was nearly midnight when he arrived. The old property dark and overgrown. He walked through the tall grass to the stone fountain, now cracked and dry. The marigold garden had gone wild, orange petals glowing ghostly in the moonlight. He knelt by the fountain and finally let himself cry. "Caroline," he whispered to the stars, "I think I found her. I think I found our baby girl." The wind rustled through the marigolds, and for just a moment, Thomas could swear he heard his wife's voice humming. That old lullaby. Thomas hired the best private investigators in Chicago before dawn even broke. He sat in his home office, the same one where he'd taken that fateful business call 20 years ago, and slid a manila envelope across the mahogany desk. "I need everything," he told Marcus Chen, a former FBI agent who specialized in cold cases. "Birth records, employment history, medical files, and I need it yesterday." Marcus examined the photo Thomas had taken of Lucy, discreetly from across the restaurant. "You think this is your daughter?" "I think that pendant around her neck is one of a kind. And I think 27 years ago, a baby girl was born who would be exactly her age today." "Mr. Harrington," Marcus said carefully, "I've worked your daughter's case before. You know I have, and I've seen a lot of families chase ghosts. Sometimes a pendant is just a pendant." "Then prove me wrong," Thomas said, his voice hard, "because I can't live with maybe anymore." After Marcus left, Thomas did something he hadn't done in 15 years. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out Emily's case file. 3 thick binders documenting every lead, every false sighting, every crushing disappointment. He'd stopped looking at them after Caroline died. It hurt too much to see his daughter's face smiling up at him from missing person posters, to read witness statements that led nowhere, to trace the same dead ends over and over again. But now, with Lucy's honey-colored eyes fresh in his memory, he forced himself to look again. By the third day, Thomas had established a routine he knew was unhealthy but couldn't stop. Every evening at 6, he'd park his SUV across the street from Villa Dorada and watch Lucy work through the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows. He told himself he was looking for proof, some gesture, some mannerism that would confirm what his gut already knew. But really, he just needed to see her, needed to know she was real, Lucy noticed. Of course, how could she not? The same expensive SUV, the same man in the tailored suit, sitting there night after night like some kind of well-dressed stalker. It should have terrified her, should have sent her running to the police. But there was something in his eyes, a grief so profound it felt familiar. Like an echo of her own nameless loneliness, she'd spent her whole life feeling like a ghost, like she was watching the world through glass. Other people had parents, had baby pictures, had stories about their first words and first steps. Lucy had nothing but a silver dolphin and a void where her childhood should have been. The orphanage in Arizona had been kind enough, St. Catherine's Home for Children. She could still picture the adobe walls and the courtyard with its single struggling orange tree. Sister Maria had been the one to find her in the desert just outside Tucson, wandering in a dirty dress with the pendant clutched in her small fist. No shoes, no ID, no idea who she was. They'd kept her for 3 years, hoping someone would claim her. No one ever did. Then the Millers fostered her for a while, a sweet couple who treated her well but eventually moved to Florida without her. After that came a group home in Phoenix, then community college, then Chicago, where she'd been chasing something she couldn't name for the past 6 years. And now this man, this Thomas Harrington, was looking at her like she was the answer to a prayer. On the 4th night, Lucy's shift ended, and she found Thomas waiting outside in the rain. He wasn't sitting in his SUV this time. He was standing on the sidewalk, soaked through, clutching a brown envelope like it was the most precious thing in the world. "I'm sorry," he said when she pushed through the door. "I know this is crazy. I know you probably think I'm some kind of lunatic." Lucy pulled her jacket tighter. "Are you?" "Maybe," he laughed. But it was a broken sound. "Probably, but I need to show you something." "Please." Against every instinct that told her to run, Lucy nodded. There was something in his desperation that called to her own. They climbed into his SUV and he spread the photographs across the dashboard. Baby Emily with a tuft of dark hair and curious eyes. Emily at 3, laughing in a kiddie pool. Emily at 5, missing her 2 front teeth. Emily at 7, wearing a white dress and the dolphin pendant, her smile bright as sunshine. Lucy's hands trembled as she picked up each photo. The resemblance was undeniable. The same dark hair, the same honey eyes, even the same slight dimple in the left cheek. But it was more than that. Looking at these pictures felt like looking at a stranger who somehow wore her face. "That's me," she whispered. "I mean, that looks like me when I was little, but I don't have any photos from my childhood. I don't remember any of this." "Because someone took it from you," Thomas said, his voice thick. "Someone stole you from my side 20 years ago." Lucy felt a chill run down her spine. She'd spent her whole life with a vague sense that something was wrong, that she was supposed to be somewhere else, someone else. The therapist at the group home had called it dissociative amnesia, a fancy term for a brain that had locked away memories too painful to process. "You're saying you believe I'm your daughter." Thomas pulled out a folded paper. "This is an order for a DNA test. If you agree to take it, we'll know the truth. No more questions. No more wondering." Lucy took the paper with shaking hands. One test, one simple test, and she could finally know where she came from. She could have a father, a family, a past. Or she could have another crushing disappointment, another door slammed in her face. "Yes," she said. "Let's do it." While Thomas and Lucy waited for the DNA results, someone else was watching. Patricia Harrington stood at her bedroom window in the east wing of the Naperville estate, a glass of scotch in her hand, and observed her brother's increasingly erratic behavior with growing alarm. He'd stopped coming to board meetings, stopped returning her calls, and yesterday she'd overheard him on the phone with his lawyer, discussing updating his will, and recognizing a potential heir, Patricia had spent 20 years carefully positioning herself as Thomas's successor. She'd sacrificed relationships, worked 80-hour weeks, played the dutiful sister while swallowing her resentment. The empire was supposed to be hers when he finally drank himself to death, or jumped off the Lakeshore Drive bridge, or did whatever grief-stricken widowers eventually did. But now, this waitress, this Lucy Miller, threatened everything. Patricia set down her scotch and picked up her phone. She scrolled through her contacts until she found the name she needed, someone who specialized in making problems disappear, or at least, in finding the kind of dirt that made problems go away on their own. "I need you to investigate someone," she said when he answered. "Lucy Miller, 27, works at Villa Dorada in Gold Coast. I need birth certificates, medical records, employment history, everything. And if you can't find anything," she paused, "make something up." After she hung up, Patricia returned to the window. Down below, Thomas's SUV pulled into the circular driveway. He got out, and there she was, the girl with the pendant. They were laughing about something, and Thomas's hand was on her shoulder in a way that was almost paternal. Patricia's grip tightened on her glass until her knuckles went white. She'd worked too hard for this, sacrificed too much, and she'd be damned if some convenient orphan with a piece of jewelry was going to steal her inheritance, even if that orphan really was Emily Harrington. Especially if that orphan really was Emily Harrington. That night, Lucy lay awake in her tiny studio apartment in Pilsen, staring at the water-stained ceiling. The dolphin pendant rested against her collarbone, warm from her skin. She'd worn it for so long that she barely noticed it anymore. But now, knowing its history, it felt heavy. She thought about Thomas's face when he looked at those photographs, the naked hope in his eyes, the way his voice cracked when he said Emily's name. What if she was Emily? What if she really had been stolen from a family who loved her? What if somewhere in her locked-away memories, there was a mother singing lullabies and a father carrying her on his shoulders? But what if she wasn't? What if she was just some orphan whose pendant happened to look like another girl's? What if she was about to break this man's heart all over again? Lucy rolled onto her side and closed her eyes. In the darkness, she saw flashes, a garden full of orange flowers, a stone fountain, hands reaching for her, a woman's voice, soft and melodic, singing a song Lucy couldn't quite remember, and another voice, a different one, cold and sharp. "Don't cry, little girl. Soon you'll forget all of this." Lucy's eyes snapped open, her heart racing. Where had that memory come from? Was it even a memory, or just her imagination running wild? She touched the pendant and whispered into the darkness, "Who am I?" The apartment didn't answer, but somewhere across the city, in a mansion full of shadows and secrets, the same question echoed through empty halls. The Harrington estate rose from the Naperville landscape like something out of a fairy tale, all white columns and marble facades, with manicured gardens that probably cost more to maintain than Lucy made in a year. She sat in Thomas's SUV, staring up at the mansion through the windshield, and felt herself shrinking. "This is where you live?" she asked. "It's where I exist," Thomas corrected quietly. "I haven't really lived anywhere since Emily disappeared." He'd invited her to dinner while they waited for the DNA results. Lucy had almost said no. The gap between their worlds felt impossible to bridge. Him in his tailored suits, and her in her waitress uniform. Him with his pharmaceutical empire and her with her studio apartment that smelled like the Indian restaurant downstairs. But something in his eyes had stopped her from refusing, a loneliness that matched her own. The front door opened before they even reached it. A stern-looking woman in her 60s stood in the entrance, her expression making it clear that Lucy was about as welcome as a stray dog. "Mr. Harrington," the woman said coldly. "We weren't expecting a guest for dinner," then said another place. "Margaret." Thomas's voice carried an edge Lucy hadn't heard before. "This is Lucy Miller. She'll be joining us." Margaret's eyes traveled over Lucy's cheap jacket and scuffed shoes with undisguised contempt. "Of course, sir." Inside, the mansion was even more overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers hung from 20-foot ceilings. Oil paintings and gilded frames lined the hallways. Lucy's footsteps echoed on marble floors that probably cost more than her entire existence. "It's beautiful," she managed, though intimidating. would have been more accurate. "It's empty," Thomas said. Caroline always wanted to fill it with noise and life and children running through the halls. But after Emily, he trailed off, gesturing vaguely at the pristine, lifeless perfection surrounding them. They walked through a sitting room where furniture looked too expensive to actually sit on, past a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and finally into a dining room dominated by a table that could seat 20. 2 places were set at one end, looking absurdly small in the vast space. "Just us?" Lucy asked. "My sister Patricia lives here too, in the East Wing, but she keeps her own schedule." Something in Thomas's tone suggested that was a good thing. They barely sat down when heels clicked against marble, sharp and purposeful. A woman appeared in the doorway, blonde, immaculately dressed, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thomas, I heard we had a guest." Patricia Harrington's gaze landed on Lucy with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. "How unexpected?" "Patricia, this is Lucy Miller." "Ah, yes, the girl with the pendant." Patricia glided into the room and took a seat across from Lucy. "Uninvited. How convenient that you should appear just when my brother is feeling particularly vulnerable." "Patricia," Thomas warned. "What?" "I'm just stating facts. A waitress shows up wearing a piece of jewelry that looks like Emily's, and suddenly she's dining at the Harrington estate. Forgive me for being curious about her intentions." Lucy felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I didn't ask for any of this. Your brother approached me. Of course he did. And I'm sure you had nothing to do with making sure that Pendant was visible while you served his table." Patricia's smile sharpened. "These things sell for a dime a dozen at craft markets, you know. Silver dolphins with glass stones. Very popular in the Southwest. The emerald came from my wife's engagement ring," Thomas said, his voice dangerously quiet. "It's one of a kind, you know that." "Patricia, do I? Emeralds all look the same to me." Patricia leaned back in her chair, studying Lucy like a specimen under glass. "So, tell me, Lucy Miller, what's your story? Born and raised in Arizona, I presume." "I don't know where I was born." Lucy forced herself to meet Patricia's cold gaze. "I was found in Arizona when I was 7. Before that, nothing." "How tragic. And now you think you might be Emily Harrington, heir to a pharmaceutical fortune worth billions. What a remarkable coincidence." "That's enough," Thomas said sharply. "Lucy is our guest. If you can't be civil, you can leave." Patricia stood, her smile never wavering. "I'm just looking out for you, brother. Someone has to. Enjoy your dinner." She paused at the door. "Oh, and Lucy, that pendant suits you. Emily would have outgrown it by now anyway." The silence after she left was suffocating. "I'm sorry," Thomas said finally. "Patricia has always been difficult. She doesn't handle change well. She thinks I'm a con artist. She thinks everyone's a con artist. It's how she survives in the business world." Thomas picked up his wineglass, then set it down without drinking. "But she's wrong about you. I can feel it." Lucy wanted to believe him, but Patricia's words had planted seeds of doubt. What if she was just an opportunist, consciously or not? What if her subconscious had seen Thomas at the restaurant and manufactured some fantasy about being his long-lost daughter? "Tell me about Emily," she said, desperate to change the subject. "What was she like?" Thomas's face softened. "She was light, pure light. Caroline used to say she was sunshine in human form. She loved dolphins, obsessed with them, actually. We took her to see them at Shed Aquarium for her 6th birthday. And she cried because we had to leave. That's why I had the pendant made." "What else did she love?" "Marigolds. Caroline planted an entire garden of them at our farmhouse downstate. Orange marigolds, hundreds of them. Emily would run through them for hours, making up songs about flowers and sunshine and..." His voice cracked. "And she had this laugh, this incredible crystalline laugh that made everyone around her smile." Lucy felt something stir in her chest. Not quite a memory, more like the ghost of one. Orange petals against blue sky, the smell of earth and growing things. A woman's voice singing. Did her mother sing to her? The question came out before Lucy could stop it. Thomas looked at her sharply. All the time, Caroline had this lullaby she made up. Something about stars and dreams and... He paused. "Why do you ask?" "I don't know, sometimes I hear music in my dreams." A woman's voice. I can never remember the melody when I wake up, but it feels," Lucy struggled for the word, "safe. Like home." Thomas reached across the table and took her hand. His eyes were wet. "Caroline used to say that love leaves an imprint, that even if we forget everything else, we remember how it felt to be loved." Dinner arrived. Some elaborate dish Lucy couldn't identify, but neither of them had much appetite. Instead, Thomas talked. He told her about Emily's first day of school, how she'd insisted on wearing her dolphin pendant and had told everyone it was made of magic emeralds. He described the farmhouse, the stone fountain where Emily would play, the way Caroline would garden while Emily sang her made-up songs. And with each story, Lucy felt something shifting inside her, fragments that didn't quite fit together, but hummed with a strange recognition. A fountain, orange flowers, a voice singing, sunshine and laughter, and a feeling of absolute safety. "I keep having these flashes," she admitted. "I thought they were just dreams, but now I'm not sure. There's this garden, and water, and..." She hesitated. "And sometimes there's another voice, a woman's voice, but not the singing one. This one is cold. It says, 'Don't cry, little girl. Soon you'll forget all of this.'" Thomas went very still. "When do you hear this voice?" "In nightmares, mostly. They started a few years ago. I'm in a car, and it's dark, and someone's holding me, and this voice keeps saying that over and over. 'You'll forget. You'll forget.'" "Lucy, that's..." Thomas stood abruptly, knocking over his water glass. "That could be a memory, a real memory from the night you were taken. Or it could just be my brain making up stories because I want so badly to have a past. The DNA test will tell us the truth. We just have to wait." But Lucy could see the hope blazing in his eyes, and it terrified her. What if the test came back negative? What if she wasn't Emily? She'd break this man's heart, and he'd spent 20 years with it already shattered. They walked through the mansion after dinner, Thomas showing her rooms he clearly never used. Emily's bedroom had been preserved exactly as she'd left it. A shrine to a 7-year-old girl frozen in time, stuffed dolphins lined the shelves, a child's drawings covered one wall. The bed was made with princess sheets that no one would ever sleep in again. Lucy stood in the doorway, unable to cross the threshold. It felt like trespassing on holy ground. "I haven't changed anything," Thomas said quietly. "Caroline used to come in here every day and read to the empty room. She'd pretend Emily was still here. Still listening. The doctor said it was unhealthy, but I understood. Sometimes delusion is kinder than reality." Lucy finally stepped inside. She touched the stuffed dolphins, the small desk, the bookshelf filled with picture books, and then she saw it, a drawing tacked to the wall. A child's crude but enthusiastic rendering of a fountain surrounded by orange flowers, with 2 stick figures holding hands. "Me and Mommy in the garden," the caption read in wobbly letters. Lucy's vision blurred, her chest tightened. She reached out and touched the drawing, and suddenly she was 7 years old again, sitting at this very desk, clutching a crayon. Tongue stuck out in concentration as she tried to capture the best day ever on paper. "I drew this," she whispered. "I remember drawing this." Thomas was beside her in an instant. "Lucy, the crayon was orange, my favorite color, and I couldn't get Mommy's hair right, so I just made it big and curly like the flowers, and you..." Her voice broke. "You came in and told me it was beautiful, even though I'd drawn your head too big." She turned to Thomas, tears streaming down her face. "How do I know that? How could I possibly know that?" He pulled her into his arms, and Lucy collapsed against him, sobbing for reasons she couldn't name. 20 years of loneliness and confusion, and feeling like she didn't belong anywhere came pouring out. And somewhere in the East Wing, Patricia Harrington listened to the sound of crying and poured herself another drink. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by courier to the Harrington estate. Thomas held it in his hands for a full 5 minutes before he could bring himself to open it. 20 years of searching, of false hopes and crushing disappointments, had led to this single piece of paper. Lucy sat across from him in his study, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. She'd taken the bus from Pilsen, too nervous to let Thomas send a car. The past week had been surreal. Dinner at the mansion, the memory of the drawing, the feeling that her entire life was about to change one way or another. "Whatever it says," she told him. I want you to know that meeting you has meant something to me. Even if... Don't. Thomas's voice was rough. Don't say goodbye before we even know. He called his lawyer, Richard Morrison, who'd been with him since the beginning. Richard arrived within the hour, along with Patricia, who'd insisted on being present. She swept into the study in a cream-colored suit, her expression carefully neutral. Well, Patricia said, settling into a chair by the window, I suppose we're about to solve the mystery. Thomas ignored her. His hands trembled as he broke the seal on the envelope. The paper crinkled too loudly in the silent room. Lucy watched his face, trying to read his expression as his eyes scanned the document. His lips parted, his eyes filled with tears, and then, with a voice so choked with emotion that Lucy barely recognized it, he read aloud, Probability of paternity, 99.9%, based on the genetic markers analyzed. Thomas Harrington cannot be excluded as the biological father of Lucy Miller. The room seemed to tilt. Lucy heard a rushing sound in her ears, like ocean waves or wind through trees, or the sound of her entire world rearranging itself. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. You're my daughter, Thomas whispered, looking up at her with tears streaming down his face. Lucy, you're Emily. You're my Emily. He stood and crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms. Lucy felt herself break open. 27 years of feeling like she didn't belong anywhere, of wondering who she was and where she came from, of that hollow ache in her chest that never quite went away. It all came rushing out in gasping sobs against her father's shoulder. Father. She had a father. I looked for you, Thomas said into her hair, his voice shattered. Every single day for 20 years. I looked for you. I never stopped believing. I never stopped hoping. I know, Lucy, Emily whispered. Somehow, I always knew someone was looking for me. Richard Morrison cleared his throat, wiping at his own eyes. Congratulations, Thomas. This is a miracle. But from the window, Patricia's voice cut through the moment like a knife through silk. Well, she said, standing slowly, I suppose congratulations are in order. Welcome home, Emily. Her smile was perfectly crafted, but her eyes were cold as winter. Emily pulled back from her father's embrace and looked at her aunt for the first time, knowing they were family. There was no warmth there, no joy, just calculation. Thank you, Emily said carefully. We'll need to make arrangements, of course, Patricia continued, addressing Thomas. Legal documentation, updating the will, press releases. This will be all over the news within days. The lost Harrington heir, found after 20 years. The media will have a field day. I don't care about the media, Thomas said firmly. All that matters is that my daughter is home. Of course, but we should still be prepared. Emily will need protection from reporters. Fortune hunters, people who'll try to exploit this situation. Patricia's gaze flickered to Emily. It's a lot to take on, suddenly being a billionaire heiress. I hope you're ready for it. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. There was something in Patricia's tone, not quite a threat, but close. A reminder that Emily's world was about to become very complicated. I don't want money, Emily said. I just want to know where I came from, who I am. You're Emily Harrington, Thomas said, taking her hand. You're my daughter. That's all you need to know right now. Everything else we'll figure out together. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Thomas insisted Emily move into the mansion immediately. He had staff prepare the guest suite. He couldn't bring himself to put her in the shrine of her childhood bedroom. Not yet. Richard began the process of legal documentation, petitioning the court to restore Emily's original birth certificate and legal identity. By evening, Emily found herself sitting in her new room, a space larger than her entire studio apartment, surrounded by luxury she couldn't have imagined yesterday. Her few possessions looked pathetic, unpacked. 3 changes of clothes, a handful of books, her laptop with the cracked screen. She touched the dolphin pendant, still hanging around her neck, her anchor through 20 years of uncertainty. Now she knew exactly where it came from, and the knowledge felt both comforting and overwhelming. A knock at the door made her jump. Thomas entered carrying a photo album, its leather cover worn with age. I thought you might want to see these, he said softly. Your baby pictures, your first birthday, your first Christmas, all the things you missed. They sat together on the massive bed, and Thomas walked her through her lost childhood. There was Caroline, radiant and laughing, holding a newborn Emily. There was Emily's first birthday party, her face covered in chocolate cake. There were Christmas mornings and trips to the beach, and ordinary moments that meant everything. Your mother would have been so happy, Thomas said, touching a photo of Caroline pushing toddler Emily on a swing. She never gave up hope either, even at the end, when the medication made her confused about everything else. She still remembered you, still believed you'd come home. I wish I could have known her, Emily whispered. You did, for 7 years. You knew the best mother anyone could ask for. The memories are locked away, but they're there. Thomas closed the album. The neurologist I've consulted thinks that with therapy, with time, some of those memories might resurface. Would you want that? To remember? Emily thought about the fragments she already had. The orange flowers, the singing, the fountain, and the other memories, the dark ones, the cold voice telling her she'd forget. Yes, she said. I want to remember everything, even the bad parts, especially the bad parts, because someone took me from you, and I want to know who. Thomas's expression hardened. I have investigators working on it. The Pendant, your placement at the Arizona orphanage. There's a trail there somewhere, and when I find who did this, he stopped, taking a breath. When I find them, they'll pay for every moment they stole from us. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She wandered the halls of the mansion, trying to reconcile her memories of cramped apartments and group homes with this palatial estate that was apparently her birthright. She found herself in the library, drawn to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the grounds. Trouble sleeping? Emily spun to find Patricia standing in the doorway, a glass of amber liquid in her hand. Just adjusting, Emily said carefully. Patricia entered the room, her heels silent on the Persian rug. It's quite an adjustment, I imagine. From serving tables to being served, from poverty to wealth, must feel like a dream, more like someone else's life. But it is your life now. The DNA doesn't lie. Patricia took a sip of her drink. Thomas will want to give you everything. He'll drown you in guilt-driven generosity. It's his way of apologizing for losing you in the first place. He didn't lose me. Someone took me. Semantics. Patricia moved to the window, standing beside Emily. I want you to know, I hold no ill will toward you. What happened to you was tragic, but I've spent 20 years helping Thomas hold this company together while he grieved. I've sacrificed my own life for the Harrington legacy. I just hope you'll remember that when you're making decisions about the future. Emily looked at her aunt's reflection in the dark glass. What kind of decisions? Thomas will want to make you his heir, president of Harrington Biopharma. He'll probably write me out of the will entirely. Patricia's smile was brittle. I'm just asking that you remember who was here for him when you weren't. I was 7 years old. I didn't choose to leave. No, but you're choosing to come back now, into a world you don't understand, claiming a fortune you didn't earn. Patricia turned to face her fully. I'm not saying you don't deserve it. I'm just saying, be careful. This world eats people alive. She left Emily standing at the window, her words hanging in the air like poison. Emily touched the glass, looking out at the grounds where somewhere, years ago, a little girl named Emily Harrington had played. That girl was her. She was that girl. But between then and now lay 20 years of stolen life, and someone had to be responsible. Someone had torn a 7-year-old child from her family and left her in a desert to forget who she was. And as Emily stared at her reflection, neither fully Lucy Miller nor fully Emily Harrington yet, she made a silent promise. She would remember everything. She would find out who did this, and they would answer for it. 3 days after the DNA results, Patricia struck. Emily was having breakfast in the sunroom when Thomas's assistant knocked on the door, her face pale. Mr. Harrington needs you in his study, immediately! Emily found her father standing at his desk, staring at a yellow folder like it contained a bomb. Patricia sat in the corner, her expression one of carefully crafted concern. Richard Morrison stood by the window, looking deeply uncomfortable. Emily, Thomas said without looking up. Patricia found something about your past. What kind of something? Patricia stood, smoothing her skirt. I hope you understand. I only did this to protect my brother after the DNA results. I thought it prudent to do some additional research, just to make sure we had the complete picture. Emily's stomach dropped. What did you find? Patricia slid the folder across the desk. A birth certificate, registered in Arizona, 27 years ago. Parents listed as Martha Miller and Daniel Miller, both deceased in a car accident 15 years ago. Emily opened the folder with trembling hands. There it was, official-looking, complete with state seal and registration number, Lucy Miller, born March 15th, 1998, to Martha and Daniel Miller in Tucson, Arizona. I don't understand, Emily whispered. The DNA test is accurate, Richard interjected quickly. Emily, this doesn't change the fact that you're Thomas's daughter. Then how does this exist? Emily held up the birth certificate. How can I be Emily Harrington and Lucy Miller? Forgery, Thomas said, his voice tight. Someone created a false identity for you. Or, Patricia said softly, there's another explanation. Perhaps the DNA test was tampered with. Perhaps someone very clever manufactured this entire situation. Thomas's head snapped up. What are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just saying we should consider all possibilities. Patricia's tone was reasonable, almost kind. Emily, or Lucy, or whoever you are, you seem like a lovely person, but you have to admit this is all very convenient. You appear at exactly the right moment, with exactly the right pendant, saying exactly what my brother desperately wants to hear. I didn't make up the DNA test, Emily said, her voice shaking. I didn't forge the results. No, but someone could have. Labs can be bribed. Tests can be manipulated. Patricia turned to Thomas. Brother, I know you want this to be true. I know you've been waiting 20 years for this moment. But what if someone is taking advantage of your grief? What if this is an elaborate con? Emily saw doubt flicker across Thomas's face, and something inside her shattered. After everything, the memories, the connection, the feeling of finally belonging somewhere, he was going to believe Patricia's poison. The test was conducted at GeneQuest Labs, Richard said firmly, one of the most reputable facilities in the country. I oversaw the chain of custody personally. There was no opportunity for tampering. Then explain the birth certificate, Patricia pressed. I can't, Richard admitted. Not yet, but I have contacts at the Arizona Registrar's office. I'll find out where this came from. Thomas finally looked at Emily, and the pain in his eyes was almost worse than doubt. Emily, I believe you. I believe the DNA test, but I need to understand what happened. I need to know who created this false identity and why. So do I, Emily said quietly. She stood, setting the folder back on the desk. But I can see you're not sure anymore, and I don't blame you. If I were you, I'd have questions too. Emily, don't. I'll stay at a hotel while you figure this out. I don't want to be somewhere I'm not wanted. You're wanted, Thomas said desperately. You're my daughter. Nothing Patricia found changes that. But Emily could see the uncertainty in his eyes, the way he kept glancing at the birth certificate like it might hold answers. Patricia had planted her seeds of doubt perfectly. I'll be at the Palmer house, Emily said. Call me when you know the truth. She left before Thomas could stop her, before she could break down completely. Behind her, she heard Patricia's voice, soft and sympathetic. I'm sorry, brother. I truly am. Emily lasted 2 hours at the Palmer house before the walls started closing in. The room was beautiful. Luxury she still wasn't used to, but it felt like a cage. She'd gone from having a father to being alone again in the span of one morning. Her phone buzzed. Thomas, probably. But when she checked, it was an unknown number. Ms. Miller, this is Dr. Sarah Chen from Northwestern. Your father scheduled an appointment for you. Hypnotherapy to help recover your memories. If you're still interested, I have an opening this afternoon, Emily almost said. No. What was the point of remembering if Thomas didn't believe her anymore? But then she thought about that cold voice in her nightmares. Don't cry, little girl. You'll forget all of this. Someone had done this to her. Someone had stolen her life and created a false identity to cover their tracks. And Emily was going to find out who. I'll be there, she said. Dr. Chen's office was warm and comfortable, designed to put patients at ease. The psychiatrist herself was in her 40s, with kind eyes and a gentle manner that reminded Emily of Sister Maria from the orphanage. Your father explained the situation, Doctor, Chen said as Emily settled into a recliner. 20 years of missing memories. Recently returned to your biological family. That's quite a journey. If I'm really part of that family, Emily said bitterly. Apparently, that's up for debate now. Doctor. Chen tilted her head. The DNA test was conclusive. Yes, but someone created a birth certificate saying I'm someone else. So now nobody knows what to believe, including you. Emily was quiet for a moment. I know who I am. I can feel it, but I can't prove it. Not without memories. Then let's see if we can find some. Dr. Chen dimmed the lights. Hypnotherapy isn't magic. It won't create memories that don't exist, but it can help you access memories that your brain has locked away for protection. Are you ready? Emily nodded. Closing her eyes, Dr. Chen's voice was soothing, guiding Emily back through the years. You're 27, 25, 20, 15, 10, 7 years old. You're 7 years old, Emily. Where are you? The garden? Emily heard herself say, her voice higher, younger. Mommy's garden. The flowers are everywhere, orange like sunshine. What are you doing in the garden? Playing by the fountain, making up songs. Mommy's inside making dinner. Daddy's on the phone. He's always on the phone. But it's okay because he always comes back. What happens next, Emily? The memory shifted, darkened. It's getting dark. I should go inside. But the stars are so pretty, and there's a car, a black car. It's not supposed to be here. Emily's breathing quickened. Her hands gripped the armrests. Someone's getting out. I should run. I should scream, but they're smiling, saying it's okay, saying Daddy sent them. Who is it, Emily? Can you see their face? It's a man, tall. He's saying Daddy needs me to come with him. There's an emergency, but something's wrong. His smile is wrong. I try to run and he grabs me. His hands are so strong I'm screaming, but he covers my mouth and... Emily's eyes flew open, her heart hammering. She was hyperventilating, tears streaming down her face. There was a woman, she gasped. In the car. I couldn't see her face, but I heard her voice. She said, "Don't hurt her. Just give her the medicine." And then everything went dark. Dr. Chen handed her tissues. That's enough for today. You did incredibly well. Emily, the woman in the car, Emily said, wiping her eyes. I know that voice. I've heard it recently. I just can't place where. Emily returned to the hotel with the memory burning in her mind. A man and a woman, coordinated kidnapping, and medicine. Probably sedatives to keep her quiet during transport to Arizona. Her phone rang. Thomas. Emily, where are you? I've been trying to reach you. Palmer House, like I said. Richard found something. The birth certificate. It was created 5 years ago, not 27. Someone forged it recently and backdated it into the system. Paid off a clerk at the registrar's office. Emily's heart leaped. So it's fake. I'm not Lucy Miller. You were never Lucy Miller. You've always been Emily Harrington. Someone just tried very hard to make it seem otherwise. His voice cracked. I'm sorry I doubted you. I'm sorry I let Patricia get in my head. Please come home. Who created the birth certificate? Did Richard find out? The payment was made from a shell account. We're tracing it now. But these things take time, Emily. Please, I can't lose you again. Emily thought about the memory. The woman's voice in the car. The way it had sounded so familiar. Like something she'd heard recently. And then it clicked. The cold, measured tone. The calculated cruelty hidden beneath polite words. Dad, Emily said slowly, I need to ask you something. Where was Patricia the night I was kidnapped? Thomas was silent for a long moment. What are you saying? I had a session with Dr. Chen today. I remembered something. There was a woman in the car. I couldn't see her face, but I heard her voice. And Dad, I think I've heard that voice in your house. Emily, that's a serious accusation. I know, but think about it. Who benefits most from me being gone? Who's been trying to discredit me since the moment I appeared? Who has access to enough money to pay off officials and create false documents? Thomas's breathing was heavy on the line. I'll look into it. But Emily, if you're right, if Patricia was involved, then your sister kidnapped your daughter and let you suffer for 20 years. And we need to prove it. Come home, Thomas said. We'll figure this out together, but please come home. Emily looked around the hotel room. Beautiful. Expensive. Empty. Not home. The mansion wasn't home either. Not yet. But her father was there, and for the first time in her memory, she had a father worth going home to. "I'm on my way," she said. Thomas hired forensic investigators that night, not the regular kind, the kind that governments used when they needed to find money hidden in offshore accounts, when they needed to trace shell companies back to their sources, when they needed to uncover crimes that powerful people thought they'd buried forever. Emily sat in Thomas's study at 2 a.m, watching her father pace like a caged animal. Neither of them could sleep. Patricia was in the East Wing, probably sleeping soundly, unaware that the net was closing around her. Or maybe she knew. Maybe she'd always known this day would come. 20 years, Thomas said, his voice raw. If it was her. "Emily, if my own sister did this to us, to Caroline, how do I come back from that?" "You don't," Emily said quietly. "You just move forward." Richard Morrison arrived at dawn with preliminary findings. He spread documents across Thomas's desk. Bank records, corporate filings, travel logs from 20 years ago. "I started with the birth certificate," Richard explained, pointing to a highlighted section. "The payment to the Arizona clerk came from a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. That company received quarterly deposits from another shell company, which traces back to..." He paused, looking at Thomas. "A personal account belonging to Patricia Harrington." Thomas sat down heavily. "That's not proof she kidnapped Emily, just that she paid to create a false birth certificate. She could claim she was trying to protect me from false hope, from con artists. Except the deposit started 20 years ago," Richard said, "right after Emily disappeared. Why would Patricia be funneling money to the Caymans in 1998 unless she was paying someone off?" "Who?" Emily asked. "Who was she paying?" "That's what we need to find out." Richard pulled out another document. "I also looked at Patricia's travel records. The night Emily was taken, Patricia told you she was at a pharmaceutical conference in Boston, but there's no record of her attendance, no hotel reservation, no flight, nothing." Thomas's hands clenched into fists. "Where was she?" "According to credit card records, she was in Chicago, at a hotel near O'Hare. She checked in at 9 p.m. and checked out the next morning." Emily felt ice in her veins. "The night I was taken was around 8:30. She could have been there. But we need more than circumstantial evidence," Richard cautioned. "We need someone who can place her at the scene. We need the man who actually took Emily." Thomas stood abruptly. "Then we find him." Emily remembered a man. Tall, probably in his 30s back then. Patricia would have needed someone she trusted. Someone who'd keep quiet for 20 years. Someone she's still paying, Emily added. Because if the deposits continued, that means he's still alive and still a liability. Richard nodded slowly. "I'll need access to all of Patricia's financial records. If she's been making payments to the same person for 2 decades, there'll be a pattern." "Do it," Thomas said. "I don't care if we have to freeze her accounts, get court orders, whatever it takes. Find him." For 3 days, Emily barely left the mansion. Patricia noticed something was different. Thomas's cold distance. The way conversations stopped when she entered a room. The lawyers and investigators coming and going at odd hours. But she maintained her facade of concerned aunt, offering Emily sympathetic smiles and Thomas worried looks. Emily watched her carefully, studying the woman who might have destroyed her childhood. Patricia was good. Her mask never slipped. But sometimes, late at night, Emily would hear her pacing in the East Wing, hear her on the phone with someone, her voice too low to make out words but sharp with tension. She was worried. Good. On the 4th day, Richard burst into Thomas's study where Emily and her father were reviewing old police reports. "I found him," Richard announced, spreading out printouts. "Victor Hale, age 58, former employee of Harrington Biopharma. Worked in security from 1995 to 1998. Resigned abruptly 3 weeks after Emily's kidnapping." Thomas grabbed the papers. A photo stared back. A man with hard eyes and a military bearing. "I remember him. He was head of security at our pharmaceutical plant in Indiana. He left the country immediately after resigning," Richard continued. "Moved to Mexico, and for the past 20 years, he's been receiving monthly payments of $10,000 from one of Patricia's shell companies. $2.4 million, Emily calculated. That's a hell of a retirement package. For a hell of a crime, Thomas said grimly. Where is he now? Puerto Vallarta, living under his own name, apparently confident he'd never be found. Richard pulled out an address. We could have Mexican authorities pick him up, but that'll take time and red tape, or I go get him myself, Thomas finished. Dad, no, Emily said immediately. If he's dangerous, he kidnapped my daughter and has been bleeding my sister dry for 20 years. I'm going to look him in the eye when I ask him why. Thomas was already reaching for his phone. Richard, arrange a private jet. Emily, you're staying here where it's safe. Absolutely not, Emily stood. This is my life he stole. I'm coming with you. Thomas opened his mouth to argue, then saw the determination in her eyes. The same stubbornness he'd had his entire life. Fine, but we're taking security, and if things go south, you run. Understood? Emily nodded, though they both knew she wouldn't. They landed in Puerto Vallarta 14 hours later. The contrast from Chicago's winter to Mexico's tropical heat was jarring. Thomas had hired local security, 2 former federales who knew how to handle delicate situations. Victor Hale lived in a modest villa on the outskirts of the city, nothing flashy enough to draw attention. Smart, Emily thought. He'd taken Patricia's money and lived quietly, avoiding suspicion. Until now, Thomas knocked on the door. One of the security guards stood to the side, hand near his concealed weapon. Emily waited behind her father, her heart hammering. The man who opened the door had aged 20 years, but was unmistakably the same person from the security photo. His eyes widened when he saw Thomas. Mr. Harrington, he said, his voice hoarse. I wondered when you'd find me. Then you know why we're here. Victor looked past Thomas to Emily. Something flickered in his expression. Guilt, maybe, or recognition. She looks like her mother. Don't, Thomas said sharply. Don't you dare talk about Caroline. Victor stepped back, letting them enter. The villa was sparse, a man living in self-imposed exile. He poured himself a drink with shaking hands. I'm not going to resist, he said. I've been living in hell for 20 years. Maybe prison will be better. You're going to tell us everything, Thomas said. Who hired you? Why? What happened that night? All of it. Victor downed his drink and nodded. It was Patricia. She approached me 6 months before it happened. Said she needed a problem solved. Said her brother was making foolish decisions about the company's future. About his will. Said the only way to secure the Harrington legacy was to remove his daughter from the equation. Emily felt sick. She wanted me dead. No. Victor looked at her directly. I told her I wouldn't kill a child. She said that was fine. She just needed you gone. Somewhere you'd never be found. Somewhere you'd forget who you were. She'd researched places, orphanages in remote areas, facilities that didn't ask too many questions. So you took her to Arizona, Thomas said, his voice deadly calm. I watched the house for weeks, learned the patterns. That night, I waited until you went inside for a phone call, told Emily there was an emergency, that her father needed her. She trusted the uniform. I was still security at the company then. Kids trust uniforms. Emily's memory flashed. The man smiling, saying Daddy sent him. The wrongness of it all. Patricia was in the car, Victor continued. She wanted to be there, wanted to make sure it was done right. We gave Emily something to make her sleep. Just sedatives. Nothing harmful. Drove through the night to Arizona. Patricia had found a small orphanage run by nuns. Told them she'd found Emily wandering in the desert. They asked questions. But Patricia was convincing. Said the girl had clearly been through trauma. Probably ran away from an abusive situation. The nuns took her in. The pendant, Emily said. Why did you let me keep it? Victor's expression softened slightly. That was my one act of mercy. Patricia wanted to take it, to eliminate all connections. But I saw how you held on to it even in your sleep. I told Patricia the nuns would think it was strange if we stripped you of everything. Better to let you keep one thing. They'd assume it was a gift from whoever abandoned you. You took $2 million to destroy a family, Thomas said. 2.4, Victor corrected bitterly. And every dollar has been poison. I see that little girl in my dreams every night. Hear her crying for her daddy. I tell myself I saved her life. that Patricia would have found someone else, someone who might have been crueler. But I know what I am. I'm a monster who sold his soul for money. One of the security guards stepped forward with handcuffs. Victor didn't resist as they secured his wrists. I'll testify, he said to Thomas. Against Patricia. I'll tell them everything. It won't undo what I did, but maybe it'll give you justice. Justice would be watching you suffer the way my wife suffered, Thomas said. The way I suffered, but I'll settle for watching you rot in prison. As they led Victor to the car, Emily stood on the villa's terrace, looking out at the ocean, somewhere out there. Patricia was probably packing, preparing to run, but she had nowhere to go. The evidence was overwhelming. The confession was recorded. It was over. Thomas joined her at the railing. Are you okay? Emily thought about the question. Was she okay? She'd just learned that her own aunt had orchestrated her kidnapping, had paid a man to steal her from her family, had let them suffer for 20 years without a shred of remorse. No, Emily said honestly, but I will be. Thomas pulled her close. We both will. They flew back to Chicago that night with